Well, good morning or good afternoon, friends, whatever it is where you are, and welcome to a new course of study in our online Bible class. We're going to have a study of the Gospel of Matthew. And I'm excited about this study. I'm excited about Matthew's message. So if you want to, let's just jump right into it. Get your Bible, get a Bible, and let's read Matthew chapter 1. If you happen to have print out the handout that was attached to the email you were sent, the second page of the handout has today's lesson text on it, and so you can just follow along there if you want to. Matthew chapter 1, starting in verse 1, reading verses 1 through 17. This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar, Perez the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab. Amminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, and Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. And David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife, and Solomon the father of Rehoboam, Rehoboam the father of Abijah, Abijah the father of Asa, Asa the father of Jehoshaphat, Jehoshaphat the father of Jehoram, Jehoram the father of Uzziah, Uzziah the father of Jotham, Jotham the father of Ahaz, Ahaz the father of Hezekiah, Hezekiah the father of Manasseh, the father of Ammon, Ammon the father of Josiah, and Josiah the father of Jeconiah and his brothers at the time of the exile to Babylon. After the exile to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel, and Shealtiel the father of Zerubbabel, Zerubbabel the father of Abiud, Abiud the father of Eliakim, Eliakim the father of Azar, Azar the father of Zadok, Zadok the father of Akim, Akim the father of Eliud, Eliud the father of Eleazar, Eleazar the father of Matan, Matan the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. And Mary was the mother of Jesus, who is called the Messiah. Thus there were 14 generations in all from Abraham to David. 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah. So Matthew's got a really important message. He's going to write us a biography, but not just a biography, it's a gospel. It's the evangelon. It's the good news about Jesus Christ. So if you know, the opening page of a book, if you're in a bookstore, you pick up a book, you read the first page, or if you're online, they say they got a little part you can read there, and no, I don't, let's go on to the next one. You know, why start such an important book with a list of names that are hard to pronounce? What is it? You know, why do this? I mean, it almost ensures to me that you're not going to be on the bestseller list. This is something for, scholars or something. The average person is not going to, I mean, what do they care? You know, I got thinking about my own genealogy and, me and then my dad. I never knew my grandfather. He died in 1929, my father's father. I knew my mother's father. And then his father, I think I know his name, and then his father's father. Well, after that, it really gets fuzzy for me. Okay, I've looked it up before. It's written down someplace. Okay, but what is it with this? Why is this genealogy so important? And I think the key is in the very first phrase. It says, "This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah." The Messiah. Now, let me drill into this a little bit further by playing a little game with you, okay? And it's going to be called Complete the Lyric. Complete the Lyric. So I'm going to give you just a short little snippet of a song lyric, and I want you to say, or at least think, the rest of it. We'll start off pretty easy, okay? Just a second. Let me get out your test paper here. Jingle bells, jingle bells. You got that one, didn't you? Silent night, holy night. All is calm, all is bright, right? Yeah, you got that one. What about, Oh Say Can You See? Yeah, that's right, by dawn's early light. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. Yeah, that's right, that saved a wretch like me. Jesus is Lord. Okay, so you got all those. Jesus is Lord, my Redeemer. You got all those. Now, here's the bonus question to separate, the lower level from the upper level. Okay, are you ready? This is the final question. Wise men say. No, that has nothing to do with the wise men that came to visit Jesus. Those of you who are real aficionados of popular culture out there know that wise men say only fools rush in. Okay, if you don't know it, ask an American friend and they'll explain to you about Elvis Presley's great song, I Can't Help Falling in Love with You. Okay, so what's the point of all this? See, this is deeply ingrained in our consciousness, the songs, the things that are part of part of our identity. Now, who are you? What's your identity? Some people say the core of my identity is my ethnicity. I am black, I'm white, I'm Asian. Other people say it's my nationality. I'm an American, I'm Chinese, I'm Korean, I'm Japanese, I'm Kenyan. It's my national identity. And so when you say the first line of the national anthem to me, then I know it because it's part of who I am. Other people say, no, my religion, my relationship with God is at the core of who I am, or it's my family. That's who I am. And so, when you say one of these songs, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound, that's me. And I can say it just like I say my name. It's no effort to recall it or remember it. What I want you to know is that for the first century Jews, the first audience, the first people that got this book and opened up and read it, Matthew, their identity was tied in their religion, their nationality, their family, and these were all the same thing. You see, to be a Jew, that was who you were. That ordered your whole life. If you've ever seen the musical Fiddler on the Roof, it's tradition. It's everything. It's everything you do. It all revolves around religion, family, nationality, and they are all the same thing. And so, when you tell people that this guy is the Messiah, bells go off in their head, and the reason why is here's some of their greatest hits, okay? All-time greatest hits in the box on your handout from the book of Isaiah. Isaiah 7:14, therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. Emmanuel with us, El is God, God with us. Isaiah 9, verse 1 and verses 6 through 7. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. Those who live in a dark land, the light will shine on them. For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders. And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There will be no end to the increase of his government or of peace on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. And then Isaiah 11, 1 through 11. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of the knowledge and fear of the Lord, and he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes or decide by what he hears with his ears, but with righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, with the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness a sash around his waist. The wolf will live with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, and their young will lie down together. And the lion will eat straw like an ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand in a viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy in all my holy mountain. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. So when you say somebody's the Messiah, this is what it's all about. And so why does it matter that this Messiah guy is the son of Abraham? Well, the promise is made to Abraham, Genesis 12:3, and then over in chapter 22, say, Abraham, God's going to really bless you. Whoever blesses you, I will bless. Whoever curses you, I will curse. And you're going to have a huge family. You're going to be a conglomerate. Maybe you're going to have a corporate. You're going to be big stuff. But it's not so you can be so great, Abraham. It's not so people will be still talking about you 4,000 years later, which they are. It's so that through you, I will be able to bless all people on the earth. So this Messiah is not just a national leader to save the Jews and throw the Romans out of the Holy Land. This is a message of hope for the whole world. And you got that in some of the prophecies we just read from Isaiah. What about the son of David? Well, the son of David means that he is a descendant of David. And so as we read here, a shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. And that on the throne of David, he's gonna establish his kingdom. He has to be a descendant of David. In the 2 Samuel chapter 7, God promises David. He says, your throne is going to last forever. Your dynasty is going to be eternal. He said, I'm going to get mad at some of your descendants, but I'm going to punish them, but I'm not going to get rid of them. You're going to have somebody to reign on your... Well, how did that work out? How that worked out is there were several generations in the Davidic dynasty, but in 586 BC, the Babylonians came, conquered Jerusalem, and, burned the place and took who they wanted, the smart people, the educated people. They took them back to Babylon, put them to work, left everybody else that was, white trash. White trash. They left those folks there to scrape around, and that was the end of the Davidic dynasty. No more kings for the Jews, There was one guy that called himself the king of the Jews. He got nailed to a cross. Remember that? So it's not a thing, except Messiah. He is the son of David, and he has come to be the King of Kings. He has come back. And so if we prove through genealogy that Jesus descended from Abraham, descended from David, then we're making a case that he is the Messiah. And this is the whole point of the book of Matthew, is that Jesus is this Messiah, this promised priest and king, leader for God's people to bless the whole world. That's who Jesus is. It's all about the identity of this poor traveling rabbi in first century Palestine named Jesus, from up there around the Sea of Galilee. So this is the case that Matthew's making. So he gives us this genealogy here, and he says, there are 14 generations from Abraham until David, exactly 14. Now, there probably weren't, because we know by comparing this genealogy with others that the author here has taken some literary license, and he's left some generations out to make it exactly 14, 14, 14. 7 is an important number in the Bible. It implies completeness or perfection. So twice 7 is the ultimate perfection, right? And there are a lot of 3s in the Bible, particularly in the book of Matthew. So there are 3 groups of 14. Now, why is this? Well, it enables the reader to do what I haven't done with my own genealogy, and that's memorize it. So memorization is a thing. It's a good thing. And there are a lot of things in the Bible that are grouped this way to aid in memorization. They didn't have smartphones with Bibles on them back then. So you carried a lot of it around in your head, which we could learn to do too. Anyway, so memorization, but also to say, hey, through all this living and dying, through all this happiness and sadness, through all this suffering, God has been working. and he has structured history to break out with his kingdom, for his will to be made manifest. Not on our schedule, okay? But God's plan is perfect, and we're seeing it work out here in our space and in our time. Now, the author here presents us with some problems, and I'm not going to solve all the problems today, but here's a big problem, and I mean a really big problem, from the standpoint of contemporary Jews, or even from the standpoint today of building a case for somebody being something great. Today, instead of a genealogy, we produce what we call a resume. And a lot of you have nice resumes that you've worked on a lot through the years, and then you also know how to read a resume. And so what you do when you read a resume is you look for little wrinkles or little unexplained periods of time, or you ask questions about the person's claimed accomplishments. And if you happen to know somebody they mention on the resume, then you call that person up and you say, did so-and-so really do what they claim to do here? Tell me everything you know about this person. And so you kind of look, between the cracks in the resume. And so when you do a resume, you try to have no cracks in it, okay? And you don't say, well, look, I was kicked out of college for being disrespectful to a teacher in my sophomore year. You don't say that. You don't say, I was fired from my third job because the company went bankrupt and I wasn't contributing anything and it was a disaster. You don't put things like that on your resume. And by the same token, you don't mention women in your genealogy at all. But if you do mention them, you mention people like Sarah, the mother of the faithful, or Rebecca, or Rachel, or Leah, famous women, okay? Great women. You don't mention the 5 women that are mentioned in this genealogy. And who are these 5 women? Well, if you look closely, and it's easy to do if you've got the handout because they're highlighted on there. Anyway, there's Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, Uriah's wife, we don't get her name, and Mary. And all 5 of these women, you don't want them on your resume because Tamar acted like a prostitute, okay? She acted like a prostitute. She was a widow, and back then widows were, they were very disadvantaged. We would use that word marginalized. And she really needed some official help from her father-in-law, Judah. She's been married to Judah's son. Judah's son died. And Judah was supposed to help her get another husband. Well, it's kind of an involved story, kind of a soap opera, and I won't go to all the details here, but Judah didn't do that. So Tamar kind of put on her veil and sat beside the road and acted like a prostitute. Judah came by and got out his credit card and took advantage of her services, shall we say, and she got pregnant. This is in the Bible, okay? Don't look at me. I didn't write it, okay? She gets pregnant with her father-in-law, and it's twins. And so somebody tells Judah several months later, hey, did you know Tamar's been acting like a prostitute and she's gotten pregnant? He said, well, we'll just have to burn her at the stake because we burn prostitutes in our culture. And so they get ready to burn her, and she gets out Judah's credit card, which he had left behind, and said, you might tell Judah that before he burns me, he may want his credit card back. Actually, it was a signet ring or something, or a seal that you wore around a necklace around your neck. But anyway, it's the same thing. And so Judah says, well, actually, maybe we won't burn her, okay? And so this is the ancestor of Jesus Christ we're talking about here. These are what you and I would call trashy people, okay? But this is what's going on. Go right down the list. Rahab is what we would call a madam. She's running a brothel in Jericho. Any way you translate it, doesn't. Somebody said, well, maybe it's actually a boarding house. Well, back then, guess what boarding houses were, And she manifests faith, and she's saved when the Israelites take the city of Jericho. And so she's an ancestor somehow of this guy Boaz. There are probably gaps in the genealogy, but that was the way this sort of literature was produced back then. She's not a Jew, okay? Let's make that really clear. Tamar's probably not a Jew either. Okay, these are impurities in the line of the Messiah. So Rahab is a Canaanite, okay, and she runs a house of prostitution. She's a prostitute herself. She's an ancestor of the Holy Messiah. Then we get to Ruth. Ruth's a really good person if you read the book of Ruth, but just so happens she's not Jewish either. She's a Moabite. She's really ethnically, racially, she's on the outs. Is God trying to beat into our heads this thing about not being a respecter of persons and not being racists? Is he condemning racism by this genealogy? Looks like it to me. But anyway, let's keep going. Okay, then we get the really juicy story. Rated R. Or X, depending on how you want to do this. But, David, he's attracted to this woman Uriah. And so he's the king, and kings get what kings want. And Bathsheba gets pregnant. So he has Uriah killed. Things happen in combat that you can't avoid that. And so since he's the king and this woman's left a widow, well, he just takes her into his household. Isn't he charitable? But that doesn't fool God one bit. Now, David had a lot of wives, and that wasn't uncommon back then. It wasn't uncommon for kings. Why, God, did you pick this woman to be the great of Jesus Christ? Why? And then finally, we come all the way down to Mary. Ah, yes, the virgin birth, which I believe is a virgin birth. It's not a problem for me, for God to work that kind of miracle, but nevertheless, she is pregnant out of wedlock, okay? Let's not paper that over. In fact, there were people who wanted to put Jesus down, and so they would call him the son of Mary. You see, you didn't call somebody the son of his mother, you call him the son of his father. And if you don't know who your daddy is, well, in their culture, that was really a bad thing. That was a really bad thing. If your own father wouldn't claim you, then, nowadays we're a little bit more relaxed about that, but not back then. So we have these 5 women, these 5 stories that are all part of the big story of the Messiah. What's the message here? What does this tell us about God? I've suggested to you that it shows that God is working through history. Now, I've shown a light on the women, and there are a lot of the men in the genealogy, like Shealtiel. We don't know anything about that guy. Matan, we don't know anything about him. Nahshon, Salmon. But the men we do know something about, a sizable fraction of them, particularly the kings, are people like Manasseh that are worse than bad. They're like Idi Amin. They're like Joseph Stalin. These people are ruthless, cruel, selfish, pathological, crazy. I mean, these are awful people. And so what's God doing here? And so I think the message is God's will is going to get done. He can use righteous people and he can use wicked people. He can get the job done. He's working in history to bring us the Messiah. And maybe you have a different solution to the question, what's this doing here in the opening lines of the book of Matthew? And I would love to hear it. But that's the way that I get it. A couple of words of introduction about this Gospel of Matthew. The oldest existing versions, existing manuscripts of this book are written in Greek, in Koine Greek, and they're in the oldest Bibles, the Sinaiticus and Vaticanus manuscripts, that date, I think, from the 400, 500 time frame. I may be off a little bit there. But there are much older documents, say from the 110 to 200 AD time frame, where people are saying, Matthew wrote a gospel. He wrote the story of Jesus. It's a really good book. You ought to go read this book. And they offer other comments about it. So it seems that the book of Matthew, and scholars, discuss this endlessly, could have been written any time between maybe 50 AD and 150 AD. A lot of the early commentators say that he wrote in the Jewish language, and back then the Jewish language was Aramaic. No Aramaic manuscripts of Matthew have ever been discovered. As I said, the oldest ones are in Greek, and many people believe strongly that the original composition was in Greek. And that could be possible because who was Matthew? Well, Matthew was one of Jesus' 12 apostles. Some places he's called Levi, and some places he's called Matthew. But he was probably kind of an educated guy. But the interesting thing about Matthew is when Jesus meets him, he's working as a tax collector, which would give you a good income, but would meant socially you were dirt because you were collaborating with the pagan Roman conquerors. And so he's up there probably running a toll booth, a tax booth up around Capernaum, up in Galilee, someplace on one of the main roads that goes through there. And Jesus says, I want you to come follow me. It probably was interesting when Matthew is getting to know the other apostles, because a lot of them are not friendly with tax collectors or friendly with anybody that's friendly with the Roman government. And so we see called into this community of fellowship, Jesus and his disciples. Jesus and the core group, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, maybe, and then the 12 around them, and then maybe up to, by the time Acts chapter 1, maybe 120, the core group of disciples at the time that the church begins. In this community, we have a certain level of diversity. Even though it starts off they're all Jewish, there's a lot of reasons for hard feelings, hurt feelings, misunderstandings, animosity between, say, a Matthew and a Simon the Zealot, or even Simon Peter for that matter. Yeah, but Matthew's probably well educated, probably speaks Aramaic and writes it, probably speaks Greek and writes it, probably, is kind of a math whiz because he's an accountant. And he cooks the books too, because that's why people didn't like tax collectors, because they collected more tax than they were supposed to, and they kept the overage and gave the rest to the government. It was a good living, So this is Matthew Levi. Now, what's Matthew writing about? It's great that Matthew is the first book of the New Testament because he really builds a bridge to the Old Testament. I think about 11 times he'll tell us something that happens in Jesus' life, and he said, this was done to fulfill the words of the prophet, and then he quotes the Old Testament. There are many more places where he doesn't make such a big deal about it, but he'll allude to or quote something from the Old Testament. Furthermore, the book of Matthew is arranged around 5 major discourses or speeches that Jesus makes. And so some people say this is just like the beginning of the Old Testament, where we have 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy, the Pentateuch, the 5 great discourses of the Torah. Matthew has 5 great discourses of the new Moses, of Jesus. Some people say, not so much, but that's one way to outline the book. There'll be a bunch of activities, a bunch of things that Jesus does, and then he gives a long teaching or sermon. So that's another bridge back to the Old Testament. Matthew has a lot of material that is in common with Mark. Some people say Matthew used Mark. Some people say Mark used Matthew. Some people say that Mark and Matthew both use a common source. If we have faith, if we believe Matthew was an apostle, a lot of this he's writing from a first-hand account, or in the case of Jesus' birth, the first few chapters, interaction maybe with Jesus and his family. So I don't have a lot of problems with the textual criticism about where did this come from and where did that come from. I think it is truly an inspired book. So where are we headed with this whole thing? Is the point of the book of Matthew to tell those first century Jews that could say, something like a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders, just like you can say, wise men say only fools rush in, or oh say can you say see by dawn's early light, that they internalize all this Messiah stuff. Is he just talking to those Jews in the first century that are looking for a Messiah, or something broader? And I want to say emphatically that this is not just a gospel for Jews. This is a gospel for you and me. And it's very important to understand the mission of the Messiah, as described in the Old Testament, was to bring all nations together under his rule. And so where we're headed with this whole book is what you and I, Bible students, often call the Great Commission. The very last chapter, Jesus gets his surviving followers together and tells them to make disciples of all nations, of all the ethnos, of all the ethnic groups, of all tribes and languages and tongues. Make disciples of these people. So his vision for his kingdom, and we're going to talk a lot about kingdom in the book of Matthew, is a global kingdom. Well, I hope that you will do some reading in Matthew on your own. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take our time in working through this text. And so we'll finish chapter 1 and maybe start on chapter 2 a little bit next time. But don't feel like, well, I'm going to read 8 verses in chapter 1 and chapter 2, and that'll be it for this week. To really study this book as a book, you need to read the whole book several times. Okay, so read read as much as you can in the book of Matthew, and read it over and over and over again. Even if I'm not a very good teacher, you'll get a whole lot out of the book of Matthew, whatever you get from me. So I'm trusting it's going to be a great blessing to both of us, this new study for hopefully a new year. At some point in the next couple of weeks, we're going to pause our study of Matthew, and I'm going to give you a special lesson. It's kind of like a Christmas special, maybe. It's not about Christmas, though. It's going to be I Have a Dream. So we'll be talking about I Have a Dream. Maybe that'd be a good thing for the new year, and we'll march on through Matthew up through the end of December. At any rate, God bless you this week. So many people we need to pray for that are fighting illnesses, especially COVID. We want to pray for our church leaders, our government leaders at all levels. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.